Greetings and salutations, scholars. Welcome back to Scholars with a capital S. My name is Rachel Listowski, and to ring in the new year, we have a very special guest back with us, President Harvey Stenger. Thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast.
Thank you, Rachel. I had a great time last year when I did the podcast, and I'm looking forward to another great time this year.
Yes, me too. So obviously, this is a very special time. You recently announced that you would be stepping down from your position as president. So we are very honored to have you back here to kind of chat with us, to look back on these past 13 years, correct?
Yes.
That you have been president of this university. And so something that's been really special to me that I was even reminiscing upon over Christmas with my family, I have like some Binghamton alum in my family, is how much the university has grown tremendously. I've talked to Professor Steve about just even the massive increase in applicants, the interest for this school, the respect for this school has grown so much in your time here. And so this is a big whammy of a question, but what are some of the achievements that you're most proud of that you've worked on here?
That is a very difficult question because what you said, getting bigger, was the original thought that I had when I came to Binghamton, but not to get bigger, to get better. Mm-hmm. I used to say, you can get better when you get bigger, but you don't automatically get better by getting bigger. So while we're getting bigger, we have to get better.
Right.
And I pounded that into every meeting that I had when I got here. And so taking the approach to grow, not just in scale, but in quality and in programs, was something that we constantly focused on. So which one? Where do we begin? First one, I came and I was touring the area, and I noticed that we didn't have an incubator where we could start up companies, which was something that I had at the last two places I was at. And so we said, we're going to have to do that. And then I found out that if you have the will and the desire to get something done, and you can articulate the reasons for it, you can get people behind you. And especially in this case, getting the New York State government behind us.
Right.
They were investing significantly in lots of things when I first got here, but perhaps not on the things that we might have thought were of high priority. So working with the governor's staff, working with our local senator and our local assemblywoman, we were able to convince them to give us the funds for the incubator. And that was just the first one. That was a $19 million project that now has 30, 40 companies associated with it, graduated a couple dozen companies, created hundreds of jobs, investments of millions of dollars in these startup companies. And that was the beginning. And then they just happened one after another after that. The pharmacy school in Johnson City was probably the next big one. Expanding the nursing college into a college of health sciences and nursing, where we added physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, adding space on our main campus, enhancing space on our main campus, like our engineering building was advanced. We built new research laboratories on the ITC campus. And again, there was always a constant theme of, if we're going to build something physically, then we have to make sure that it adds quality to the university and that it adds programs to the university. Enrollment, growth, opportunities to do research, because you need money to run those programs. So as you grow your tuition and your state allocation and your research dollars and your gift dollars, you can invest those in faculty members, great laboratories, new staff members. And then the last 2 years from the new governor, Governor Hochul, we had huge increases in state allocation, which I've only been able to start the use of that. Those allocations will last us for another decade.
Wow. That's impressive.
It is fun. It is exciting.
And so you mentioned the importance of communicating your goals and convincing people that, hey, this thing I'm pitching to you, it's valuable. And so was there a kind of strategy that you had coming in to make those ideas successful? Like, how did you go about convincing people? Was there any kind of lens that you took?
Yeah. So the first thing that I've learned from many other leaders that I've worked for it's not your idea.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be everybody's idea. And how do you make that happen? Well, we started a process called the roadmap. In 2012, we put out a call for volunteers. We had over 400 volunteers, faculty, staff, students, alumni, community members. They served on 9 different committees. They met for about 6 months. And we drafted the strategic plan for the university that we still use today, that we continually update. And we meet 6 times a year to talk about how we're doing in each one of the strategic priorities. So from that beginning, we created a forum for ideas and where ideas need to be vetted, where ideas can come from. The steering committee for the roadmap has over 60 people on it right now.
Wow.
We have had the last couple of years, we have annual calls for proposals. What ideas do you have that you'd like to see implemented? And so some of the first things, like the pharmacy school, was part of the original roadmap.
Wow.
The incubator was part of the original roadmap. Growing in the area of computer science, school of management, health sciences was all part of that initial plan. Increasing our internationalization was also part of that. Increasing our community engagement was part of the roadmap. Making sure that we're an inclusive campus and that everybody feels comfortable on campus was a big part of the roadmap. Enhancing our research profile, enhancing the student learning experience. So all those things, if you look at the roadmap.com, wherever it is out there in the web, you'll be able to find the strategic priorities that we have, and they've been consistent for 13 years. It's important. It's important to have a plan because, and it's important to be transparent because people want to know, well, why are we doing that? Or how are we doing that? Or who made that decision? And,
Right.
and so if you have a forum where people can learn why you're doing things and what you're doing, the questions of why start to go away, and they start to trust you.
Yeah.
That's important.
I couldn't agree more with that. Having the avenue to explain to people, this is the plan, these is where your resources are going, our resources are going, and this is why it's going to work to help all of us.
And you think about it, we've kept tuition pretty low the whole time. I mean, the last 4 years, I don't think tuition has gone up $1. Maybe some of the student fees and dining for inflation has gone up, but the tuition rate is still $7,700 a year. It's hard. That's a hard thing to find anywhere in the United States right now.
Yes. Incredibly difficult. And so people make jokes, Binghamton is the SUNY Ivy, the public Ivy, right? But really, there's a lot of pride that I feel in this community of students and the fact that we are at a public institution that is dedicating the value of education and making it as affordable as it can be to get this, top tier.
We get it.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. We understand it. The reason we're here, the reason why the state gives us funding, the reason why I think we're so successful is that it's the success of our students that is our primary goal. Success of our students, primary goal. And then it's easy to say, does this investment help our students? Well, maybe it does. Maybe they all do. But which one advances the students' needs greater? So you have to then compare them and rank things as well. I remember a group of students I worked with when we were forming the roadmap. There were 4 of them, and I used them as consultants. They were juniors at Binghamton. So we used to talk about how we wanted to be the premier public university, period. Because when I got here, there was this ranking that said we were the premier public university in the Northeast. And I said, well, we've won the regionals. It's time to go to the nationals. And then we said, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be the premier #1 public university in the country? Well, you get to define it. That's the other thing. Don't let U.S. News or some other magazine define it. We get to define it. And so that was also part of the roadmap is how do we define premier? How do we define success? And then, I don't know if you saw it, but last semester, a ranking came out by Forbes magazine. They ranked the public Ivies.
Yes.
And they just said, here's the top 10 public Ivies based on student quality, student success. And we were on the list.
Yep.
With Michigan, Virginia, Georgia Tech, just incredible universities that all have football teams playing this weekend in bowl games probably. And then there's little Binghamton in there. And what was even cooler was they ranked us alphabetically. So at the top of the list, Binghamton
Binghamton,
University
right
was
there.
the first name. And I said, that's it. We did it.
Yes. Like I said, every time those rankings come out and they said, don't put too much stock in it, right? But I'm like, that's right. Binghamton's on the list. And I go to Binghamton. So obviously, like I said, growth, but also betterment of the university. The university's in a position that, it hasn't been in before, right? We're growing all this stuff, these new schools, School of the Arts, we're putting resources into the School of Pharmacy, we're talking about nursing, all of these new things. And so obviously you've made the decision to be like, I'm going to lay down my sword, time to move on to the next chapter. But with all the, time and dedication you and your employees have put in, what are you kind of hoping the future of Binghamton is once you're out of here?
That's a great question because I'm avoiding that. I want to take the next 6 months. It's going to take 6 months from where we are now to finish the search for a president. I want to focus on just doing my job.
Right.
I don't want to think about the future, but I think it's exciting because I look back, Lois DeFleur was the president before me, and I always liked the term standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, Lois DeFleur, probably one of the first women university presidents in the country, took us from a sleepy small school into being an R1, a Research One Carnegie School, and also did something I think that was really bold, was made our athletic program Division I, which was a big deal because that meant you're in the same category as Buffalo and Stony Brook. Right. And we didn't want to be second tier to the university centers. And so she knew that was important as well. And that's not an easy thing to do, to invest in athletics, because your faculty sometimes think that that's not the right way to spend money. But she did that, and I'm glad she did, because I don't know if I would have been able to do it. So we've had good previous leaders. We have a good reputation as a university. And just by adding more things to it doesn't make it better. So you really got to choose the things that are going to make it the best.
Right.
You got to be data-driven as well. If you look at the roadmap statistics, we keep, I think, about 25 different metrics that we look at. One of the ones I think that people don't appreciate how hard we work at it, but it's called high-impact practices. These are study abroad, internships, undergraduate research, and capstone projects. And our goal is to have every student have at least one high-impact practice while they're here. And we are very high on that. We're in the 90%, 85 to 90% on that. And now we're saying we got to get to 100%. How do we do that right now? And people know that those kinds of things add a huge amount of experience to students, help them get their first job, help them become better people after they graduate. And we spend a lot of time and effort making sure those opportunities are out there. But the last 10% is always the hardest to get because they're probably students who don't have the time or don't have the resources. So we've actually now allocated money to give paid impact practices. So on-campus jobs. Now we have created a rubric for them to be considered a high-impact practice, because we don't just say, well, sit at this desk and look at ID cards when people come in. No, there's actually something else you're going to be doing and learning as part of that job and on campus. So that's been helpful in getting some of our students who need work study to also get a high-impact practice experience.
Yeah, a lot of what you said just reminds me of kind of the priorities of the Scholars Program itself. I mean, just as a requirement to graduate as a scholar, high-impact practices.
Yep.
Super important, one of the things that we track in our program. And I cannot agree more. Because of the Scholars Program, we have a nice fund of $3,500 that we can use for anything. I used that for an internship at the New York Supreme Court last summer.
Wow.
Amazing experiences, completely helped forge my path forward, past graduation. And so I think that's a fabulous priority to have.
And that was something that we didn't do right away. I remember it was probably maybe 5 years that after I'd been here, we said, what else can we do for the scholars that are here? And we thought of, well, we could give them a scholarship, and a lot of the students do get scholarships. But we said, what if we gave them a fund that they could use? We'd have to look at them carefully to make sure that they met all the criteria.
Right.
And it turned out to be one of the biggest reasons why students chose Binghamton.
Yes.
When we did a survey of students, was the $3,500 expense account that you have to do something.
It's true. For me, I remember when I got that acceptance letter in the mail of my beautiful little folder. And that was interesting to me. That was different. That's not something I really had seen from other schools, especially because it's not just something that gets applied to your account. It's money for you to use in whatever ways to, advance your professional life. And so it's true. Every single day I work in that office, people come in all the time to turn that paperwork in, and it changes students' lives. It really does. And so now that we're kind of shifting gears to the scholars program a little bit, you've been an amazing support for the program. Any person in the program knows your name, your face, which most students do, but almost on a more personal level, because you really take the time to come to our events, communicate with students in a way that, as we've always said, is pretty unique. So we've asked this question before, but I'm wondering if maybe you have a shift in perspective now that, you're moving on. What are some of your favorite memories looking back? And also maybe too with the program, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, favorite memories, there's so many.
Yeah.
And they mostly revolve around the extra activities that I've always participated in, whether it's Thanksgiving or the induction ceremony or the field trip. Trying to be present at all those was always highlights. But then there's also somehow they got into birthdays.
Yes.
And my birthday became somewhat of a challenge every year.
It is.
To see what they could do to top what they've done in the past. The one that was probably the most impressive was the hot air balloon.
Iconic. It's true.
And the fact that they had it set up outside my window of my office, where we are right now, on the Peace Quad, and I didn't know that it was happening until they said, Harvey, you want to come outside? And they took me down the elevator and took me outside. And there was a hot air balloon out there, and we gave rides for hours that day. It was tethered, so it just went up maybe a couple hundred feet and then came back down. But that was pretty exciting.
Crazy.
Really crazy, yeah.
Genuinely, we do weekly staff meetings at the office, and every year your birthday rolls around, and it is like all hands on deck, brain trust, like, what are we going to do? I had a doc running this year with ideas. I know. And I can tell you this now because, you're moving on to the next thing. But I remember, first working in the office and Catherine telling me, here's some things we've done in the past. And it was like hot air balloon. And I'm like, hot air balloon on the Peace Squad? How is that even possible? And so Catherine and I now have a running joke. It's like, we got to bring an elephant. That was the next thing we wanted to do. Didn't happen, didn't pan out, but yes, your birthday.
Maybe
I love
a robotic elephant or something.
Yes. And this year was so fun. We had Justin Frank, it was my
gosh.
Good. Yeah.
Justin was amazing.
Yes.
It was recorded.
Yep.
There is a video of
There's evidence.
Justin singing a birthday song to me at, where were we at? We were at Watkins Glen.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
So we combined too. And my birthday is usually around
the hike time.
Around the hike time. So, yeah.
So wonderful. The hot air balloon. I think I'd say the same thing. So we've talked about a lot of amazing things, whether it be these silly memories or, these really important things you've brought to the university, you and your team. So whether it be something on a larger scale or just in your everyday life working here, what are the things that you think you're going to miss about having to work as president?
Well, everybody says this. I'll miss the people. I won't miss the hard, difficult job.
Right.
If you go back and if you were to plot out my pulse rate, there's tough times, really tough times on college campuses that can be anywhere from protests to tragedies. And making it through those is part of the job. And leading people through those is part of the job, but it's exhausting too. You don't know how hard it is sometimes to talk about things and to console people when difficult things happen. But you recognize that if you don't do it, nobody else will. You have to be the one that reaches out and gives the big hug or sends the email out in early morning to make sure everybody knows that we're in touch and we're trying to do the best we can. So I think that consistency of trying to be together as a campus is important. So missing the people, missing helping the people, missing our successes, missing the wins. We won a Nobel Prize.
Yes.
We went to the Olympics. we won a $500 million grant from New York State. So you get to celebrate those exciting moments along the way. And so those are probably the things that you'll miss as well, is those exciting moments. But it's the people, especially the senior officers that we have, the vice presidents. We meet every Tuesday morning, and we just had one today. And we didn't have a lot to talk about. It's an hour and a half. We were probably done in 30, 40 minutes. But people just sat there and talked about their lives and holidays and other things. It wasn't even about work. It was just that we enjoy working together. We enjoy being together in the same team. I'll miss that.
Yeah. That's family.
That's
family.
family.
Work is one half of your whole life, right?
It is.
So the leadership thing you said, being in the president position, there's a lot of complex things going on, right? So one, you are a figurehead in a sense, right? You're like a face of a university in a way. And then at the same time, you're also supposed to be a voice for the people at the university, like you were saying. It's important to hear from you in difficult times, tragedies, protests, as you said. So how do you think you were able to strike a balance between being something that was kind of separate, right? You're kind of forced into an elevated status almost, not that you acted that way, but also trying to retain connection too. You have to play almost two roles. So how were you able to strike a balance with that?
Well, first thing about leadership is you have to learn how to be a leader. You can't just fake it. You can't just say, well, I'm going to just go out there and be a leader. There's books. There's a lot of books. And you have to read, at least I always try to read one leadership book a year. They almost all say the same thing, but they say it in different ways. And it reminds you that it is about the people. It is about how you encourage people to do good things. Probably the one that I like the best is one that has it's called the 5 mistakes that leaders make. And the first mistake is lack of trust. So it's a reverse. These are the things you should do. You should build trust. Well, how do you build trust? It turns out to be pretty simple. You make a promise and you keep it. You make a promise and you keep it. You make a promise, you keep it. And if you make a promise, you can't keep it, you tell everybody right away. I couldn't do that. I missed on that.
Accountability.
Accountability, exactly. So learning how to be a leader, I think it was one of the things that I spent a lot of time on, even before I got here in my other positions. And then making sure that you like your job. If you come to work and you say, oh gosh, this is work, you're not going to do well at it. You're not going to like your job. So finding the time, that's what the Scholars was for me. The Scholars was a way that I could just be immersed in happiness.
Yeah.
The Scholars are always happy. Going to sporting events, especially when we win. You're around people that are happy and encouraged. Being in this community, but the community struggled before I was here because of the loss of IBM and some of them, so many jobs that were lost here. That to come in and to be the person who could say, I know how you feel. I grew up in upstate New York, and I know the problems that we've had, and I think I can help. I probably can't bring IBM back, but I could probably help the economy here. And so working with the community to improve the jobs and tax revenues for the communities, and to have the campus expanding into Johnson City, into downtown Binghamton, were things that I felt were important for us to build a great relationship with the community. Again, working with the people. And that is probably the one thing that I will say was, but it's not just one thing. It was the impact on the community that Binghamton had while I was here. Because growing up in upstate New York and watching all the jobs disappear, not just here and in Binghamton, but across the whole Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, I knew that we had to do something to help improve that. And I also knew that the governor, who drove Governor Cuomo at the time, knew that the universities were a tool that he could use in improving the economy. And I took full advantage of that when I said, I need a new building for this, or I need a new building for that. And he would come up with the funds through some process that he built called the Regional Economic Development Council. I was co-chair of it. I think we got close to $500 million in different construction project funds from that process. And so taking advantage of your unique situation
Mm-hmm.
is also really important, and knowing who the person is that manages those resources, and being there for that person. I remember when we had to run the vaccination site on campus
Yeah.
for all the people in the area. We were the central place in the southern tier where people came and got their vaccination. And I said, I'll give you a building. I'll find you a building. We'll set it up there. And the governor came, and he was very, very thankful that we had done that. Again, you help each other out in different ways.
Right. Trust.
Trust. You build trust.
Like
That's
you
the
said.
first one. The second one is conflict. You have to encourage conflict. And that's why you have to have trust first, because without trust, conflict won't work. So conflict is, I'm in a meeting and I have an idea, and that's not fully baked. And people will call me out.
Yeah.
And people will say, that's not a very good idea. Well, then I'll say, well, how do you think we could make it better? And then everybody chimes in. So you have to make mistakes. You have to almost intentionally make mistakes so that people can get involved and be able to make your idea even better. So that conflict is important as well. Other things that are really important to being a good leader is make sure that you celebrate the wins. Every time something is accomplished, make sure everybody knows about it and that they feel good about it. I remember after we came back, it was the summer as we were preparing to come back from the pandemic. And we had a big party, just giant outdoors, because we still had social distancing.
Yeah.
Just to say how well we had done to make it to that point.
Right.
Because that first year when students came back, there was no vaccine. But we had 85% of our dormitory beds occupied. We had isolation and quarantine on campus. We were testing every student once a week. It was crazy. It was crazy.
It's so funny because you brought up the pandemic and I almost forgot. And, it's been 5 years,
Yeah.
which I can't handle personally. But talk about unprecedented. Wow. I can't believe that there's been so much I completely even glossed over that whole aspect. So much. I mean, when I first came here, luckily my first year, vaccinations were out. So we still had, masks, which was interesting, meeting new people, not really knowing their face. But I was able to do classes in person, which I was so grateful for. Can't even believe we tackled that. But something else you touched on was that importance of conflict. And I think something that people often struggle with leadership is wanting to do everything yourself. And in a role of your capacity, that's utterly impossible, obviously. But I think what you said is really important. You have to listen to others and consider their ideas to, implement these things that are for the betterment of the university. Like you said, you can't improve without a real group effort. It takes a village.
And right now we're in the middle of some huge projects on campus that will take the next 5 years to finish. We're building a whole new triple gym over by the East Gym. We're building a brand new dormitory between College in the Woods and Mountain View. And we're building a new lecture hall.
Lecture hall, I knew that
if
one.
you can imagine, those are right on the outer brain circle. They're all going to be, the construction is all going to go on at the same time. It's probably $150 million of projects, maybe a little bit more. And we talk about it a lot because we're worried about traffic congestion and staging of the equipment that has to be done. But I'm at that point now where I have people who I trust so much that I almost don't have to worry about it. I just have to kind of push them a little bit. Facilitate and be there to answer questions. But you never want to criticize anybody. You never want to say, gee, you should have done it this way. You have to find a way for people to figure those things out on their own. And that's probably one of the harder parts of the job, is because people like to do things themselves. And if you can avoid doing things yourself, you can get a lot more done.
Right.
You get thousands of people working rather than just one person working.
Right. Something you said that you'll miss is the celebrations. But I do want to note, I still think everything that happens after this are still things you're going to be able to celebrate.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It'll be somebody else's parade, but I'll be on the on the curb watching it go by. Graduation is certainly a big one. Graduation is always quite the event because when I got here, I wasn't really satisfied with how we did graduation. There really wasn't that ultimate event where you shook somebody's hand. And so I said, we're going to have as many graduation ceremonies as we need to so that I get to shake every student's hand. And they said, you're crazy. It'll never happen. And I said, well, we got a year to figure it out. We planned it. We ended up having 9 ceremonies. During the pandemic, we had 29 ceremonies. But normally we have 9 ceremonies.
29.
And I will shake every student's hand. And I have a lot of fun at graduation. I have fun speeches. I take selfies with the crowd. Sometimes I have a warrior scream that I just shout into the microphone because I'm so excited. So that's going to be something that I'll miss. But that's a personal thing, and I think that's what's exciting about change is that you get a different perspective. You get somebody else who comes in and does things a little bit differently. And yeah, I'll be around.
Yeah.
I'm not moving. I'll just live down the street.
You kind of talked about this already with, the whole stresses of the job, the ups and downs, and your heart rate going crazy during certain periods. But, are there things that you're happy to leave behind other than that? Like getting up early, or it could be the silliest thing. Something I've noticed, you tend to reply to emails at 5 a.m.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm wondering, is that something you enjoy? Are you a morning person, or you like getting up early, going for your run or whatever you must do, and that's helpful? Or is that more a necessary evil?
It'll be a hard habit to break because it is a habit. At 4:30, I awake. I'm going downstairs.
Wow.
And making a piece of toast and coffee and open up my laptop. Usually what I do is I read my emails at night and kind of get emotionally prepared for some of the tough ones, right? And so I can kind of think about them as I'm going to sleep. But then in the morning when I'm fresh, I can get out 40 or 50 responses to people that need them right away. But that's something that I've always wanted to do, and I always enjoyed doing because you're communicating to people in a way that you can be very personal. But yeah, it has to be done at 5 o'clock because at 6 o'clock I'm out on the road running, and then I gotta get to work before the day starts. So it is something that I'll miss, actually, I think.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. That's not a hard part of the job. Hard parts of the job. SUNY.
That's something that I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about comparisons to other public institutions like across the country. I feel like, I don't know how every state works, but I feel like New York's pretty unique because we have our SUNY system,
Right.
Multiple schools. So that's just an interesting dynamic in general because you're competing with institutions within the state as well. It's like, are you the best university in New York State? So, yeah, I feel like SUNY, a whole other level of bureaucracy, very interesting.
Yeah, the history is the reason. New York State did not have a public university system when everybody else did. So in 1861, the Morrill Act that created the land-grant institutions. So all the large state universities, the Georgias, the Georgia Techs, the Oklahoma States, were all created at that time. Land was given to them, federal support was given to them to start these giant universities. So they're automatically 100 years older than us because Rockefeller in 1960 said, I'm going to create the SUNY system. So it was 100 years after the rest of the country. The reason why we didn't do it is because we had a plethora of private universities. At Syracuse and Columbia and Cornell and NYU and all the smaller ones, RPI and RIT and University of Rochester. We didn't need that. But then they realized, oh, gee, only rich kids and privileged kids are going to college in New York. Maybe we should have a public university system. So Rockefeller built it, did a great job, but it was late to the game of public universities. So it created rules that were much more centrally controlled. Whereas Penn State or Michigan or Maryland, they kind of run their colleges and universities separately from the state.
Yes. Because it's just their game.
Right. They've been around a lot longer than we have. And so they have rules that are established in the 1860s, and our rules were established in the 1960s. So
1860s, that's crazy. Kind of moving on past reflecting on the goods and the bads. What is exciting for you thinking ahead about this next chapter? Whether, you're stepping out of this position that dominates a lot of your time, your brain storage, everything. Is there anything fun and exciting you're looking forward to doing after this?
Well, the other thing that I've told people, and I'll say it here on the record, is that I'm not thinking about the day after I'm not the president until the day after I'm not the president. Because if I do, I will be distracted and I won't be able to
Do
do
your
my
job.
job. It'd be like if I was looking for another job and I was interviewing for being a president somewhere else. That'd be disingenuous. I wouldn't want to do that. However, I have thought about it because it's going to be a lot of time that I'll have on my hands. And I was a faculty member when I was at Lehigh University. I was a chemical engineering professor. I had a pretty good research program. I found myself enjoying inventing things, specifically around climate change and energy management. And I think that I would want to do that again. One of the things I have been offered, but I haven't decided whether I would do it, is to stay and be a faculty member here.
Wow.
But I don't think I would want to have full-time responsibility. I think I would look for something part-time.
Teach for the scholars
I could
program.
teach for the scholars program. I could hang out at the incubator and invent things. But I do want to use my brain in my formal training, which I haven't really been able to do for the last 20 years,
Right.
probably. And that's something. I love ice hockey. And I haven't played ice hockey for about 5 years, but there's still some men's league out there that I think I could put on the skates
I think so too.
and play with them a little bit. Have to practice a little bit before I go out there and spend some time reflecting on what's happened over the last 13 years. I wouldn't say that I would write a book, although I probably could, but I do want to think about how I can be helpful to other people with what I've learned doing this job. Right now, I'm actually a mentor for another SUNY president, and I thought it's kind of a fun thing to do. Maybe
Mentoring,
that's
yeah.
something that I can do later on. I'm still fresh enough. I still know the job
I
well
think
enough
so.
that I could pass on some good advice, and maybe travel a little bit.
Travel.
Yeah.
Any place you want to go?
So this is a scholar's connection. We were thinking of going to Ireland. We've never been to Ireland.
I want to go to Ireland.
So, and I'm looking at when we should go. And we were saying maybe September, because the president's search should be done by September. And I looking at some dates, and I go, oh, but the Scholars Hike is on September the 13th. I can't miss this. And I go, wait a minute, I'm not going to be the president then. I can miss the Scholars. And then Kathy says, well, no, you probably should go on the Scholars Hike.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
If the next president will let you.
Oh, that's actually very sweet.
So I'm delaying my plans for my vacation because of the scholars event that I probably won't even be invited.
Oh no. Well, I guess I think considering your family is interested in going, I'm almost shocked that you still want to. That's so kind.
It'd be fun.
I'm already sad we plan things so far in advance. I remember when we were picking the hike date for next year, and I was like, wait,
Right.
I'm not gonna be here. This kind of leads into the next question, but we talked a lot about change, and change is very hard for people. Even for me, like I'm graduating, all my friends are applying to grad school, applying to jobs. It's scary. It's very daunting. And you've had a really great career. As you said, you've done all sorts of things. You've taught, you were at a dean position, you're a president. How do you approach change with a positive mindset? I'm kind of asking you for advice, essentially. How do you conquer those fears and just kind of go full steam ahead?
Right. I say this a lot. When somebody asks you to do something, say yes. Even if it's something you might not want to do. But if you say no, that person probably won't ask you to do something again. That might be actually more important and more exciting than the one that you said no to. So always say yes. Take responsibilities. And then once you get that responsibility, change it. Make it better. Don't just do it the same way, because learning how to make change is the key to being a good leader. Status quo is not a good leader. Change is a good leader. And managing change that isn't successful sometimes is really important. So that's the first thing that I would say to you is look for the yeses in life. Even if you think, gee, I don't know if this is the right thing that I should be doing right now, but if you say yes, you do a good job at it. They recognize you're a hard worker, that maybe you were over talented for that position. And they say, okay, I watched you do that. You're really good at that. Maybe here's something else that I could give you. So that's my biggest piece of advice that I've given lots and lots of students. And that's also is fun when I'll get an email from somebody that I haven't seen for 30 years. And they said, I said yes. And it paid off for me. Even though I didn't think it was going to pay off for me, it paid off for me.
It worked out.
Yeah.
That's great. I think this is kind of going to be my closing thought here. But obviously, you've spent a lot of time at this university. We've talked about a lot about like what you're proud of, all these kinds of things. But reflecting inward, how do you find that this role has impacted you as an individual, do you think?
Wow. Yeah. I block those sometimes. It made me a lot more patient. I think I always knew that patience was important. I had a really great mentor when I was at Lehigh. The president of Lehigh University was just an outstanding man. And he told me once, he said, the higher up you go, the less you can get upset. People don't work well when there's negative energy.
Right.
And so always having a positive energy is really important. And people have said to me, how do you do that? And I said, well, I don't. Inside, I'm exploding. And my stomach is upside down, but I can't let that out. And that just takes hard work, a lot of patience, and a positive attitude, and a really, and I'll say this, I should have said earlier, a really supportive person at home. They can go home and you can tell them all the things that happened to you that day. And they just sit there and listen to you, and they think, good. You feel better now? Okay.
You got
let's
it
have
out.
dinner.
Let's be people now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great. I guess it's not advice, more like insight, but it's difficult being, like I said, in a leadership position, striking the balance of being almost a symbol, but also a person.
And you're not hiding your emotions. You're managing your emotions. As a leader, your emotion has to be positive and enthusiastic, no matter what the circumstances are. Certainly the pandemic was probably the one that challenged us the most, and was an opportunity for a lot of people to show that they could be great managers and they could be great leaders, because so many things had to be done.
Right.
And you couldn't do it yourself. You had to involve everybody to get things done during the pandemic. Yeah. So that was a great example of seeing people step up.
They have to become innovators too, in a sense.
Oh my gosh.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your support at home, and, just as a student, but also on behalf of the program, I just want to say, obviously, a huge thank you to you and your wife, Kathy Frankenbach, because the way that you have welcomed us into your home, it takes a lot of energy, time, resources, kindness, humility to deal with all of those kids with a smile on your face, both of you. And I don't think we can put into words our gratitude for that, truly, the both of you.
Well, in the dog.
And the dog, of course.
Right?
Of course,
Brewster would come.
Yes. Oh, but he's so sweet. He loves the hike when he does go. But that
Thank you.
is what I have for you.
It's great.
Thank you so much for coming on, taking the time, kind of being vulnerable. On our platform, on our Humble Little Scholars podcast, I greatly appreciate it. And as always, it is Scholars with a capital S. Thank you.
Great program, Rachel. Thank you so much.